Hello, and welcome back to the channel, The PROWIRC Method, where we discuss concepts from the book Happiness and Well-being Through Balance and Progress, The PROWIRC Method. Today we're going to consider the topic of relationships. In the PROWIRC Method, the PROWIRC Method is largely the acronym, which is PROWIRC, is made up of the words power, relationships, organization, wealth, image, relaxation, and creativity. The concept of the PROWIRC method is to try to maintain these areas of your life in a state of progress for a feeling of well-being and for an experience of balance. So today we're going to look at the second letter in the PROWIRC acronym, which is R and stands for relationships. So when we're looking at relationships, right off the bat, we're going to say there are a few different kinds of relationships in your life. You have your significant other relationship, you have your family relationships, you have close friends, and then beyond that, you have acquaintances and coworkers. Sometimes coworkers and acquaintances that can cross over. Some of those people can be some of your close friends, but obviously, you know what we're saying there. So we have these little various different groups of relationships. Now, the first question when we're considering relationships, so let's say first of all, we're considering the significant other relationship in our life. In the PROWIRC method, in every area, power, relationships, organization, wealth, image, relaxation, creativity. When we're considering one of these relationships, and we want to take time to think about that, the first question is a simple question we think about it. Is this relationship going through a time period of progress? Does it feel like it's in a time period of growth? Or when we think about the relationship, do we think, okay, maybe the relationship doesn't feel like it's in a time of progress. Maybe it feels like it's in a time of regress. Maybe we think there's some things that that need to be worked on. So let's suggest for a moment, when we're looking at, again, talking about the significant other relationship, let's say we start to consider that and say, okay, let's break it down. Let's think about what parts of the relationship are an area of progress, and put down a list of things that you think to be really positive or in a state of progress at that time, with the relationship. And when you see that list, definitely look at the positives and have be in a mindset of thankfulness and think, hey, I'm great that I have these positive things going on in my significant other relationship. If we're looking at the other parts of the relationship and we're looking at, okay, there's some areas here I think are not in a state of growth. Maybe they're in a state of regress. When I thought about my relationship with regard to, well, how does it compare to the first year I had the relationship? Or if that was too long ago to remember, how does my relationship compare to last year? How does this month, relate to a few months ago? You have an idea if you're sort of in one of those times where there's growth and, in progress. And so you're just really going to consider that. If you have areas that you consider are going to be, you think are in a state of regress, then, obviously in the PROWIRC method, we have creative exercises that we use to say, okay, let me use one of my creative exercise time slots to think, what are some things that I could do maybe to directly affect that? What are some activities that I could do? What are some things we could schedule? What are some things that I could pay attention to and keep in mind, to try to get that part of the relationship, back into a state of progress. So that's what we really look at doing in the PROWIRC method, and in relationships, just like the other parts. We just try to keep it in a state of progress. So now in this the relationship we're considering right now being the significant other relationship, if you think, oh my God, I'm thinking about my relationship already, which is why I watched this video, because I think my relationship's in a really negative way and in a really negative area, and it may not make it, or it might not be going forward. And this is really concerning me. And of course, if this is being the case, there's a number of, things that you can do for that. And I mean, there's always counselors out there, professional people you can talk to. There's books written on the topic. If you don't think it's quite at that, or you think it's significantly at that, we also have I have an exercise booklet that we have on the channel, the PROWIRC method, which is called Relationship Rescue. And essentially, the Relationship Rescue booklet has a bunch of exercises and ideas and things that you can do for a period of time, where, first of all, you're getting your mind around the fact that, there's serious trouble in a relationship, and sometimes relationships don't recover, but also gives you ideas and areas where you can focus on yourself, focus on your improvement, focus, on certain things in the relationship that you think you might be able to work to improve. But while you're headed to possibly those counseling meetings, or, trying to take steps together to do something, I mean, it takes two to tango, and two people have to want to do that. The Relationship Rescue booklet also deals with the idea, if the other person is just really quite resolute, they're not coming back to the situation. A lot of times, focusing on yourself and focusing on knowing yourself better and on your self-improvement and keeping your 7 areas in progress, it can do a couple of things. First of all, it can get your mind in a more positive direction, about yourself and where you need to go from here. But also, when one person starts to get a better sense of well-being, that can also sometimes change the entire sort of polarity in a relationship. If a person's having if let's say your 7 areas are kind of all out of whack and none of them are a state of progress, and you're just really down, and in your life things are really flat, well, that can negatively be affecting your relationship, and obviously these types of things affect relationships between people. The person works on themselves, starts to get their personal power, their physicality, more energy, in better shape, their organization, they work on that. You're looking at, is there problems, financial problems? You're looking at the wealth area. You're trying to get these parts back into a state of progress. My relaxation time periods, have we been doing something, something positive and significant in those time periods? Are we just zoning out? But anyway, the booklet there that's on the website, the PROWIRC method, it really takes you through a self-discovery thing for yourself there, if you're dealing with that. Now, there's a few ideas, and the idea again in the PROWIRC method, we're looking at relationships here to say, is the relationship in a state of progress? That's what we're shooting for. And in the PROWIRC method, we're trying to take the 7 areas of our life that the PROWIRC acronym, represents, and keep those, 7 areas in progress. Now, there's one note I will say here when it comes to significant other relationships. If you are in what you consider to be a abusive or violent relationship, these ideas are not designed in any way to help with that. That is a scenario that requires professional intervention, and I would recommend, if you are in an abusive or, a relationship that's in any way violent, or, that you seek professional help with that right away. I don't want people using, sort of ideas and tips for dealing with abusive and violent relationships. That's for the professionals. And so let's move on to the next area of relationships here, being the relationships with friends and family and all those kinds of things. So all those types of relationships, they're very important to you as well. I mean, you have close personal friendships, and a number of types of friendships, and how close the person is to you might be how many personal things do you discuss with the person versus not, or whatever. But and family relationships, the same thing, depending how distant the family member is from you. There's people that are closer, people further away. Now, you may have some relationships that are further off, and if it happens to be relationships like with people, your children or somebody that, just absolutely, by all means, you really want to try to pull that relationship together, no matter how it's going, you're certainly going to consider that and consider some creative ideas about that. You could run a creativity session. If you think it's past that, you can get some professional help on that. The next thing with regard to those relationships, though, is when you are now working on, we have the other book there, the other workbook on the website, the PROWIRC method, are all the exercises from this book. So in this book, there's a lot of questions and exercises and things to do, and actually one of these days, really soon, I'm going to go back over the kind of the whole thing of the book and give you an idea, all the things that you would be doing and questions. But I also, outside of the book, I have an exercise booklet, which actually just has all those activities from the book. It's also on the website, theprowircmethod.com. Those activity booklets, by the way, they're PDF things that you can just download. They're on there for like $3. So if a person is, looking to do some exercises to kind of consider the situation and ask themselves some questions and do some reflecting, I don't think you could, you definitely wouldn't mind spending $3 on yourself to say, hey, you know what, I'm just going to have a reflective, time period on this kind of thing. So for the moment, let's consider the those friendship relationships here. And I'm just got a little bit of a drum solo starting there and some background music. And I thought, I like them if I'm in a club, but we're talking about our relationships here, and we're talking about our 7 areas of our pro work and keeping them in progress. And then suddenly there's a drum solo. I'm just not sure, as a drummer myself, that I would have been able to keep my mind on that. Anyhow, so when we're considering relationships generally, there's some things that you might want to consider right off the bat. First of all, in most sort of friends or various family member relationships, when we think about the energy that goes into those relationships, do we put in a certain amount of energy into those, and are we sort of getting that energy back from the people? Do we put a certain amount of positivity into them? Are we getting a certain amount of positivity back? I have seen relationships over the years where, in a relationship between two people, where one person's always chasing the other person to be supportive and bring all kinds of energy, and the other person is sort of just kind of busily going on with their life and never noticing the person. These are things where you're going to want to consider each relationship, even when it comes to friends and family and whatever, based on that kind of exchange of sort of energy, not a tit for tat thing by any means, because at different times one person could be busier and the other person not, and you might put a little extra care or effort into someone at a time, and they might put a little care and effort more into you in the future. But there's some things you want to consider in all these relationships. For instance, is this person, is this friend, whatever, are they kind of a positive influence on my life? Are they a positive influence on the experience of my life? Am I a positive influence on the experience of their life? Am I a positive influence on them? These are things that you might want to consider when you're thinking, okay, am I wanting to which relationships am I going to want to put more time into, and where am I going to want to, invest my time in these relationships? On the bottom line of either family or friendships or whatever, and as important as all these relationships are to us, I think one question we do have to ask, the bottom line, do I hope for the best for that person? Do I always want them to the best thing to happen for them? Do they always want the best for me? This is quite a question, and particularly in certain levels of family relationships or whatever, because you say, hey, it's family, and we're always going to be family, and you are always going to be family. But you're going to invest different amounts of really time into people based on this one little stopper for me. If I come across, someone that has an agenda where they think, they somehow feel some weird Some people just feel a natural competition with everybody all the time. And so, yeah, they hope for the best for you as long as it's not better than they're doing. And these kinds of relationships, well, you have to decide which ones you think. Once I have a person, I feel, at this point in time, if I feel that person doesn't hope for the best for me, right? I mean, obviously, if I thought I didn't hope for the best for them, and I hope I either hope for the best for people or I don't spend time around them. If I meet someone that I think, I'm just not interested in what happens to that person, I don't consider them on my, list of friends and that kind of thing. But again, these are all just parts of the relationship, part of the idea of PROWIRC, and keeping these 7 areas in a state of progress. And you have to decide, but I've just given you a few ideas, and there's a few more ideas in the book. And of course there's the exercise booklet on the website, and then they're about, with the PROWIRC exercises to get to know yourself better and to answer some of these questions and just to kind of brainstorm them and think, hey, which are these areas of my life in a state of progress? And then there's also the relationship rescue book for people that think that they are maybe really needing to consider what's happening with a relationship or dealing with a relationship that maybe the other person has said, I'm out of this relationship now, and I'm not going to be coming back. The relationship rescue book kind of deals with that, because it helps the person dealing with focusing on themselves get their head around the idea that, yeah, possibly you could change the polarity in a relationship through your own self-improvement, but at the same time, if it's never, coming back, you have to be able to move on in a positive way, and get your head around that. There was one other, and the significant other relationship. I was thinking there's going to be probably people watching this that at this time they don't have a significant other, and they're open to the idea, for instance, and you're thinking, oh, one of these days, yeah, I'd like to have someone to share my life with. And I think that's a really important time to, read books like the Happiness and Wellbeing Through Balance and Progress, and do the exercise booklets, and get to know yourself better. Because in the book, when you're doing things like developing your mission statement and thinking about your goals and all of these things that you're going to do, really answering questions to get you to know yourself better, the better you know yourself, the better you're going to be at finding someone well suited for you. I mean, sometimes I see people out there, and I mean, there was times, I think, when we're all at 20 years old and we're out there, I mean, we're trying to find people well suited for us, right? But at 20 years old, I mean, how much do you really know about yourself? How much do you know about your life, and about your preferences, and about, if you could actually get into talking about your own mission statement or think about it, how much have you even thought about that? Remembering, mission statement is more about your ideals than your ideas, and goals go on past that. Anyhow, also for someone that, particularly if you are young, reading a book like this, at a younger age. This is a book, I had one video on the channel where I talked about the book that I would recommend to my 20-year-old self, and I would recommend this, because the idea of living your life looking for a good state of well-being and deciding how you want to live your life and living with balance and a state of progress moving forward is so much better than a lot of the books I read when I was young, which were get one idea and be so obsessive about it that everything else could fall to the sideline. And I'll tell you, I've certainly tried those strategies in my life before, and they can work for a while. But no, there's always a tough day coming in that idea when you say, oh, there's only one part of my life that's really important, and I pound on that, and everything else has to follow that. Well, my theory is that everything else doesn't follow that. Some of these other things, they start to fall into regress or, tough times, and they can bring ultimately one of these areas of your life, your power, relationships, your organizing. Power is also your physical and mental power and your health. I mean, obviously, if that goes down, your organization, when you're looking at this thing, your wealth, your control of your money, your image, your relaxation, your creativity. These areas, if any of them get, you get so onto one thing that one of these areas go down to such a degree it's in a state of severe regress, it can pull the whole house of cards down. And it does it for people all the time. And that's one of the reasons people are, on the, YouTube, having a look at some ideas like this. So definitely, I highly recommend balance and progress in your life. And on the topic of relationships today, if you came on here because you have some relationships that are troubling you and have really been bothering you, and that's rolling around in your head a lot, you might consider saying this mantra that I created here for the people on the channel and that I actually use myself, and to get yourself back in a positive sort of state of being. And the mantra is, I am a unique being separate from my situation. I possess the godlike power of creativity, and I choose the power of creativity and thankfulness over fear, apprehension, or anxiety every minute of every day. And anytime my mind is just spending too much time thinking about something that's negative or dark or a negative self-talk item or a worry or something where nothing positive is happening there, it's just rolling around like a bad noise, I immediately start with that mantra and just clear that out. And from there, I go on to my other sort of progress strategies in my life. Anyway, thanks again for coming out to the channel, The PROWIRC Method, and hope you got some ideas or tips to deal with the kind of relationship idea in your life, the relationship concepts. Are your relationships in progress? I hope they are, or I hope they soon will be. And have a great day, and see you next time.